Google Workspace for Education facilitates learning and collaboration among students, their parents and guardians, educators, and school admins. Since this learning and collaboration takes place online, it's important to understand what students can access using their Google Workspace accounts, what data is collected, and how student access to services can be managed by school or district admin. All stakeholders can utilize the Google Workspace for Education Privacy Notice and the Google for Education Privacy and Security Center as resources to help understand these topics. The Google Workspace for Education Privacy Notice describes the services available to users, and this video focuses on the two main categories of Google services: core services and additional services. The distinction between service types is important because what data is collected and how the data is used differs. In this video, we will discuss the ways Google makes it easy for admins to control access to both core and additional services for their users, including those users who are under 18 and may be referred to throughout this video as students. Google Workspace for Education core services include services such as Gmail, Calendar, Classroom, Assignments, Drive, Docs, Forms, Groups, Sheets, Sites, Slides, Chat, Meet, Vault, and Chrome Sync. These services are available for users by default, and admins always have the option to turn them off. Google is a data processor for core services, meaning Google only processes customer data according to a customer's instructions, and admins provide the consent for student use of core services. Of course, school admins may obtain parental consent for the use of core services as well. As users use Workspace core services, there are two types of data that are collected. First, things that are provided or created through core services, referred to as customer data. Customer data within the core services is used to provide the core services and is processed according to the customer's instructions. For example, Google processes a user's email address to send and deliver messages between teachers and students. Second, Google also collects information through the use of the services, such as activity on the services, account information, or info related to user settings and devices. It's important to note that there are no ads shown in Google Workspace for Education core services, and no personal information collected when using core services is ever used for advertising purposes. Additional services include Google consumer services, such as Google Search, Maps, and YouTube, which Workspace for Education users may have access to within their Workspace accounts if enabled by their school administrator. Additional services are turned off by default for primary and secondary institutions, and admins are required to get parental consent before enabling an additional service for end users under age 18. Google asks admins to confirm that they understand the responsibility to collect this consent from any user under 18. Google provides a template consent form for educational organizations to use to collect consent from parents or guardians. The template can be customized based on which services the organization wishes to make available to students and any local requirements. Admins can learn more about communicating with parents and guardians on these topics in this Help Center article. Google's privacy policy describes the information Google collects as users use Google additional services. This will include things like content provided through the services, such as content that is created or uploaded, and activity while using additional services. For example, terms users search for or videos users watch. Google also collects information about apps, browsers, and devices, and location data such as IP address, depending in part on device and account settings. You can find all the details around the types of data and examples within the Google Privacy Policy or Individual Product Privacy Policy. IT admins and their district or school-based teams have controls to manage which services are accessible with a Workspace account. Generally, when a service is turned off, it means that the user can't use it with the school-provided account. A few services allow a user to access the service in a signed-out state, meaning the information is not saved or otherwise connected to their account. For example, Search. Let's walk through how admins manage access to services for individuals or groups of students. All core services are on by default for educational organizations, and admins have the flexibility to control access to these services by organizational unit or group. An organizational unit, or OU, is simply a unit of users that an administrator can create in Google Admin Console and is used to apply settings to that specific set of users. Administrators can turn on services for a group of users rather than an entire organizational unit. Groups can be made up of users across organizational units. All additional services are off by default for primary and secondary institutions, and admins can control access by OU or group. Admins must obtain parental consent before enabling additional services for users under 18. Let's take a look at this experience first from the student perspective. This student is designated as under 18 and their parent or guardian has not yet provided consent for them to access Google additional services. The student account resides in an OU of users marked as under 18 and the additional services are off at the OU level. Therefore, the student gets this message when attempting to access an additional service. Oh look, the consent form has just been returned. This student now has consent to access the Google additional services requested by the district. An IT admin at the school or district will now reflect this consent in Admin Console by moving the student account to a group that does have access to the additional services for which consent has been granted. This overrides the off setting at the OU level for users in the group. Now, the next time this student attempts to log into one of these services, they'll be able to successfully access the additional service. Admins can turn additional services on or off throughout the school year. If a parent declines to consent for a particular additional service or revokes consent, admins can easily turn a service off for a particular student by removing them from the group or OU that is used to grant access. Some additional services, like Blogger, are never available to users designated as under 18. There are also additional services that do not have individual on and off controls. These services are not accessible by users designated as under 18. Thank you for watching. You can find resources in the description below with more information. If you do have any questions, there is a link within the privacy notice for admins, parents, or guardians to reach out to Google.